Hello, BookTube. As I've mentioned recently, I've been going through a horrible bout of home construction here at Hyde Cottage, just nerve-wracking and never-ending, and more major every day. Totally intrusive. Noise, people, strangers, you get so that you're used to doors opening and just strangers walking in. A horrible feeling akin to a slow-motion home invasion. And I mentioned recently that I've got the impression lately that that process is beginning to ease up a bit. Uh, and one of the side benefits of that is that I get to leave the house every once in a while for little discreet errands. I couldn't do that when the construction was at its peak because of Frida, because of my little dog Frida, who's not in these videos. She's right over. She's right over on the bed, but. I expect that she would use a lot of common sense. She's a very smart, very sensible dog. She doesn't do dumb things. She doesn't take risks unnecessarily, that sort of thing. And she has discrete things that she really likes and doesn't like. She likes meeting humans and hanging out with them, seeing what they're doing, putting her nose in their business, but discreetly, gently, at a distance, not trundling into trouble like my Basset Hound, or being just aggressively clueless like all of my Beagle boys were. So I could trust her to use common sense and maybe leave more often than I have, but I haven't wanted to do it. I don't think you would either if you had a choice in the matter. So I've mostly just stayed. When I saw a window open where it looked like there would be no trouble at all, where there'd be no construction at all, as the pace of it lessens, I went out first thing this morning when the weather was still nice and beautiful. The weather, I think, for the next 10 days or so, maybe longer than that, is going to be hot in the middle of the day, in the afternoon. So, but not in the morning, not yet. So I went out first thing this morning, did a few little errands, and of course I went to the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, a great used bookstore that I've been going to forever and ever, on a side street right off Boston Common. A fantastic shop with just books of every description, every subject matter, all fairly priced. 3 stories with turnover like you wouldn't believe. Turnover. The Brattle has trucks out all the time buying books. And in addition to that, it has a sale lot next door that's thousands more books for $1, $3, or $5. So if you want to go to the Brattle with $20 in your pocket, you could walk out with 20 books. If you wanted to, if you were careful, if the cart smiled on you, you could walk out with 20 books for that much money. It's delightful, and it would be delightful anyway because I'm a book person, so I know a lot of these books, and the ones that I don't know, the surprises, the things that I look at something and say, I've never seen you before, those are even more enjoyable than the ones that I do know. That would be a blessing anyway, but as a relief from the tedium of home construction, so much the better. So I went first thing this morning and I browsed around to my heart's content. And I came back with a pile of books, which is a far more discreet, short-term emergency than it ordinarily would be, because right now the only space I have to play around with is this little book room, which is really not, it's really not all that big. It's kind of small. So and most of the shelves are accounted for. Now, in the first spate of my inhabitants of this room, where I wasn't living anywhere else, I went at the shelves. I gave them a strong once over and cleared off 5 of them. There are 5 empty shelves in this room. And that was all the justification I needed to go to the Brattle and get a pile of books. But then again, in my own defense, a lot of these will be going out to other people. And a lot of these I won't be keeping anyway. One of the fun things about the Brattle for me, since I go there so often and have for so long, is that I'm not making lifetime heirloom decisions at the Brattle dollar carts. Instead, I'm getting as many books as I can carry. That's the metric that I use nowadays. I don't have muscular teenagers to do my toting and bailing anymore. So I get as many books as I can carry, and when I've reached that limit, I stop. It's never much money. And I'm under no illusions that I'm going to have all of these books in a year, or 2 years, or 5 years. The whole point is that to find some keepers, and you don't know a lot of times what a keeper will be until you've used it, until you've read it, and maybe gone back to it a few times. So we shall see. There are some books in this pile that I know are not keepers. for very good reasons. Like, for instance, this first one, it's a fat mass market paperback. I don't think this was ever for sale in the United States. I don't recall it, and I think I would have. This is called, it's edited by Peter Haining, and it's called The Television Crime Busters Omnibus. A big fat mass market paperback of crime and mystery short stories that formed in one way or another, either explicitly or with significant changes, the basis for all kinds of television crime dramas and cop shows. It's a fantastic premise for an anthology. What does it say here? Cops on the Box have become some of the highest rated TV series all over the world. In this outstanding collection, Peter Haining has assembled stories about the most famous and long-running of these police series, ranging from the earliest black and white episodes of cult favorites such as The Fugitive to major features such as Cagney and Lacey, Inspector Allen, and the most recent addition to their ranks, the formidable Chief Inspector Jane Tennyson of Prime Suspect. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be in here that I have not read, I'm sure. There's also a lot of stuff in there I think will be really bad, which puts it in prime striking distance of the BookTube event that your mother warned you about in August. Among August's many other BookTube events is Garb August, that was created, need I say, by Criminali to celebrate trash, to celebrate garbage books. That's coming in August. There's a baker's dirty dozen of hosts. We've added a host. We've added Cousin It from It Came From the Page. It was long overdue. I wholeheartedly cheered on Ollie's decision to add Cousin It because his channel is perfectly made for Garb August. And in case you're wondering, we all have garbage pseudonyms for Garb August. You're looking at Steve Donoghue. And in case you're wondering what It Came From the Page's Garb August name is, you might be thinking, well, I know what the first thing that comes to mind is, but there's no way that Garb August could be that bad. Yeah, Garb August is that bad. Yeah, his name for Garb August is It Came All Over the Page. Don't say you weren't warned. So there could be some garbage in here and some leads to more garbage from authors in here that I've never heard of. But in addition to that, I was counting on the Brattle to provide me with explicit garbage. not the chance of garbage, but garbage that is obvious on its face. And it did. So these next two, I got the first book in the series. This is by Ted White, and it is Phoenix Prime with a beautiful cover. I believe that's a Frank Frazetta cover. A really, really nice thing. But I guarantee the book won't be. The book is... The dream of being a Superman came true for Max Quest. That's his name. Max Quest. And immediately turned into a nightmare. He was not alone. There were others, that's with a capital O, with extraordinary powers, and the last thing they wanted was another Superman on Earth, especially one working for good instead of evil. They couldn't kill him, but they could send him elsewhere. I imagine that's where elsewhere is. I'm guessing from the description that this is the first book in the series. I've never heard about it before. But I also found another book in the series, The Sorceress of Car, however you say it. I don't know what's going on the cover there. I'm assuming that guy is our main hero, Max Quest. It's too bad that we didn't get somebody else to draw that picture because all of the proportions are wrong. If that is our hero, well, he shrunk when he traveled to another world. And also, I don't think you'd want to ride whatever that is like that. but I got these two. I got two Max Quest novels that I think will serve just fine for Garb August. Then the next one, all the rest of them are not garbage. And I think all of them are hardcovers. Yeah, all of them are hardcovers. And the next one is a perfect example of something I've talked about at the Brattle before because the turnover is so great at the shop. If you find something there and you go back to the Brattle often, you go back regularly, you can pretty much count on finding it again. That same thing. Also, if you're looking for something, or even if you don't know you're looking for something, if something just comes up in your discourse, the Brattle gods will often provide you with a book on that subject. This is a rebuy. This is by Paul Ruggiers, and it is Florence in the Age of Dante, one of the Centers of Civilization series that was so good. These books are so good. They're smaller hardcovers, but they are so wonderful. And I got a copy of this just recently at the Brattle, and out it went. It went out the door to one of you. And I thought, as I always do when that happens, I thought, well, I'd like to keep it. I'd like to read it, but the Brattle will provide. Sooner or later, I will see another copy of this at my favorite bookstore. And I did. So I grabbed it, and it has one of these nice library dust jackets on it. Same thing with this next one. This next one has a library dust jacket on it, and it's in perfect condition. And to put it mildly, the copies that I see of this used usually aren't in good condition, and there's a reason for that, because it's terrific. So people might dump their battered old copy, but they batter it first. This is by Bob Tanner, and this is Stonewall in the Valley. One of the great specific military analyses of the American Civil War that's ever been written. Big, giant thing here that is not a biography of Stonewall Jackson. And it's not a look at 1862 just in general, and it's not a look at the Southern military campaign. It's just the Shenandoah campaign of Stonewall Jackson in 1862. That's all. And that's enough. That's amazing. Tanner goes through the primary sources that we have with a fine-tooth comb. It's amazing. It becomes engrossing reading, even though it is as far into the weeds on this subject as you can get. I've often heard Civil War buffs say that you really can't recommend this to someone who doesn't know anything about the war. That's probably true. But boy, oh boy, once you do, or if you are a fan of explicit military history, this is an absolute classic. There's like you could fill a bookcase with probably 100 in English, 100 great military history studies as opposed to sweeping narrative histories, and this would be on that bookcase. And I've had copies of this over the years, but never in this good a shape, and it never stayed in shape because I keep going back to it. The Shenandoah campaign was something of a miracle. I'm not a big fan of Stonewall Jackson, to put it mildly. I think he's hugely overrated. The only figure more overrated than him in Confederacy mythology is Robert E. Lee himself. And I don't mean overrated in terms of a valorous gentleman or anything like that. I mean overrated militarily. I think he was pretty much a walking, talking disaster militarily. But he could sometimes read the ground. He was sometimes able to read the reports of his scouts accurately. It's rare that in any situation, whether it's, Chancellorsville or wherever, it's rare in any situation that you will see Jackson simply make a mistake of the type that was so common in the American Civil War, because so many of the generals on both sides were hobbyists drafted from civilian ranks. It's rare that you'll see him do that, but he underpinned his formidable military reputation with two elements that aren't enviable at all. One is that he was willing to kill his men liberally. He was willing to march them to death by the thousands, when he knew perfectly well he had no reserves and no replenishment. The South didn't have any replenishments. The men that he lost, he was permanently doing without. It behooves a commander in such situations to take care to keep those attrition losses to a minimum, and he never did. In fact, he seemed to exult in it. And the second thing that underpinned a lot of his success is that he was crazy. I wrote all these objections in a review of a biography. If I remember correctly, I'll post a link to it down below. But in the Shenandoah Valley, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the valley. It's absolutely beautiful. If you haven't seen it, it's a wonder of American topography, and it is split down the middle by the Massanutten Mountains, and that makes it look like if you've got an army on one side of the mountain and an army on the other side, they've got to go around the whole of the thing to get at each other or to go anywhere else, to go out and forage. But that's not true. In the middle, there's a Massanutten Gap that if you know the terrain and if you know the gap, you can do wonders. And Stonewall Jackson did wonders in the Shenandoah Valley with his scrappy little exhausted, underfed army against far greater forces, and for a long time. And this is the definitive account of that campaign. I was thrilled to find it in brand new hardcover with one of these library coverings on it. This is I was going to say it's going to go straight in the history collection, but of course it's not. The history collection is tarped over. It will go straight in here. Then we have work from my own profession. I've had a couple of copies of this over the years. I've hauled a couple of copies on this channel from the Brattle, but they've been in ratty condition or trade paperbacks that I knew were going to fall apart. I got them basically as placeholders. These are book reviews, poetry reviews. Rare to find a poetry reviewer who's worth reading. Marianne Moore was one. And here's another one, the greatest of them all, Randall Jarrell. This is Kipling, Auden and Company, and this is just a collection of reviews. I found it in a nice, relatively undamaged hardcover. The schmutz on the side there can be removed fairly easily, and that'll be... there are a few things in this Brattle pile that are going to consume reading time tonight. Even though I've got new books to read and new old tech to play around with, there's still things on here that are going to... I'm going to dip my toe in Kipling, Auden and Company, but I know I'm going to stay. I know I'm going to read a lot more than just a little bit. Then, believe it or not, and if you're watching this channel, probably you do believe it, all the rest are biographies. It wasn't planned. You can't go to the Brattle sale lot with a plan. You can go to the shop with a plan. But the sale lot, there is no organization out there except by price. Everything's willy-nilly. Thousands of books. You have to spend an hour, at least, looking at them all. And if you go with a plan, if you look at that sale lot and you say, well, I'm looking for all of the Harry Potter novels, you won't find them and you won't find anything else. You cannot insult the Brattle gods that way. So it wasn't, I didn't go there thinking of biography. But if the Brattle starts to present you, if the sale lot starts to present you with a theme, you had better pay attention. You had better do it. You had better follow that theme. If you ignore it, oh, that's bad news. So the first one I found is something I've read only in a cheap mass market paperback. And it's so cheap a mass market paperback that it falls apart. Every time I find a copy, I read it, and it's gone. It's done. I had no idea that it even had a hardcover edition. Considering the prominence of the author, I should probably have known that. It's Daphne du Maurier, and it's The Infernal World of Branwell Bronte in a hardcover. It's not in the best of shape. There's our tall drink of water author. This is her biography. People remember Daphne du Maurier as the author of Rebecca or Jamaica Inn. But she did a lot of nonfiction. It's all really, really good. It's all really good. And this is terrific. As a biography of Branwell Bronte, it's terrific. It will go... I'll be happy to reread it, but I almost said it'll go on the biography shelf right next to Barker's big fat book on the Brontes, which has a lot on Branwell Bronte. But of course it won't. That's tarped over. So it will go in here. It will stay in here. Then this next one, a perfect example of what I was talking about, that sometimes you will not know that you have a gap. You will not know that you want something until the Brattle provides you with a copy, until the Brattle will know better than you. It will remember better. All you have to do is be alert and go there every day like a homeless person with nowhere else to go. This is by Sarah Bradford. I found a biography of Cesare Borgia with a library covering on it. Fantastic. Sarah Bradford is, of course, a famous, extremely experienced biographer. This book is from, I would guess, the beginning of her career, 1976. And the reason that this is so telling is because I mentioned just the other day, I think during the Q&A, or a mail haul, or something or other, that this new strand, this new approach to historical fiction, deeply immersive, atmospheric, take a morally questionable character and invest them with three-dimensional humanity, not necessarily sympathy, but at least three-dimensional humanity. I mentioned that I was eager to see if that would take off, if that would become common among historical fiction. And I mentioned that if I ever tried that sort of thing, that sort of Wolf Hall treatment, it would be Cesare Borgia. That's who I would do it with, and here's a biography. Don't have a biography. I didn't have a biography of him, and now I do. And just to hammer home the point, I also found this. This is Clemente Fusero's book on the Borgias. But this great design here. You've just got three Borgia, the Borgia Pope, and I assume that's Lucrezia Borgia, and maybe Cesare Borgia there, and then nothing on the back. And this is translated from the Italian by the great classicist Peter Green. And it's just a look at the whole of the Borgias with, genealogical charts and whatnot. I don't think I've ever read this. I think, who was it that did the extremely common book on the Borgias that was a mass market forever and ever? Was it Mallet? Last name Mallet, M-A-L-L-E-T-T? I'm not remembering off the top of my head, even though I've read the book many times. I don't have that. But I didn't have any books that look at the whole of the Borgia family until now. So I have not only a background book on the whole of the Borgia clan, but also a specific book on Cesare Borgia. So what do I do? Is this a prompting from the bookish fates? Is Cesare Borgia, is a book on him maybe my next NaNoWriMo project? I don't know. I missed Camp NaNoWriMo. Missed it completely because of home construction. And I don't think I get another shot at a Camp NaNoWriMo. I think the next thing up is NaNoWriMo itself. But fantastic to have both of these. Then the next one is another example of something that happens at the Brattle when I would be reading something and I will suddenly realize I'll be reading something new. And I'll suddenly realize through reading that thing that, you know, there's an adjacent thing to this that I once had and I don't have anymore. And I wish I still did. I wish I kept it. This is reminding me how much I liked it. I shouldn't have got rid of it. The thing in question was a new book called Funny Business, which is a biography of the Washington Post humorist Art Buchwald. Since he was an absolute fixture year after year after year at the Vineyard, at Martha's Vineyard, I was asked by my editor at the Vineyard Gazette to write a review of that book. And I did, happily. And names come up in that book. Often, Buchwald had a gift for friendship. He had tons and tons of friends, including other writers, who marveled at his fecundity. They marveled at how much he could write. But they didn't hold it against him the way they did each other. He knew, for instance, the novelist Irwin Shaw. They were friends. And they exchanged letters about Irwin Shaw's creative travails. Really kind of funny to look at the exchange of letters. Shaw was in the middle of writing Rich Man, Poor Man, that went on to become a squintillion bestseller, a book of the Month Club, millions of dollars for the paperback deal. But the original draft of that thing was well north of 1,000 pages, and he was agonizing over every single one of those pages. And it was so funny. It's funny to read the book and look at the interplay because Buchwald tossed his columns off. They were very good. In their way, lighthearted satire, they were very good, but they did not require much in the way of work, and Shaw knew it. I was almost tempted. When I was reading that book, I was thinking, geez, you know, it's been a while since you read any of the fiction of Irwin Shaw. Rich Man, Poor Man, its sequel, Beggar Man, Thief, a whole bunch of other things that he wrote. It's been a while since you read any of it. I've sort of read it when it was hot and then dismissed it as just the fiction of the era, that you don't really need to revisit. And I saw a collection of Irwin Shaw novels at the Brattle today, and I almost got it. I thought, no, they didn't knock your socks off. You don't get them just for the sake of getting it. Surely that is not what the fates were prodding you to when you were reading that Art Buchwald book. And then I saw what they were prodding me to, because another name that comes up in that book often, quite often, is William Styron, the author of Sophie's Choice, who also was a Vineyard fixture. And I was seeing his name crop up over and over again. He's one of those figures that I'm not all that wild about. Confessions of Nat Turner or Sophie's Choice. I'm not all that wild about his fiction, but he's endlessly interesting. When he shows up in somebody else's biography, he's the most interesting thing on the page, without fail. A big, larger-than-life guy, even bigger in his own way than Irwin Shaw, who was no shrinking violet. And I remembered not any books by Bill Styron, and not any autobiographical writing by him. He wrote a slim autobiographical work about dealing with depression that has a lot of power even today, even today when what he was dealing with is a whole lot better understood. But rather, his letters. Years ago, there was a collection of his letters that was incredible. It's just amazingly good. It reminds me, when I look back on it, of years ago, there was also a collection of the letters of Willa Cather. And I remember thinking when I was reading that book at the time, this is 10 times more interesting than any biography of Willa Cather that I've ever read. And I felt the same way with those letters of William Styron. I thought, this is tons more interesting than his own somewhat self-consciously overladen fiction. And I was thinking, I remembered that when I was reading that Art Buchwald book, I was thinking, gee, I wish I'd held on to that collection of Styron letters, because that would be worth rereading. I'm not usually a big fan of letter collections, but that would be worth it. And I found it. This is it. This is the very thing. The deckled edges and everything. I checked immediately to see if this was my old copy. It's not. Somebody else got this and unloaded it at the Brattle. But fine by me. There's going to be another contender for reading tonight. will be at least sampling lots of those, sampling lots of the Randall Jarrell reviews and sampling lots of those letters. And then the last of the biographies, again, a little bit melancholy because my royal biographies section, I have a whole floor-to-ceiling bookcase of royal biographies, English royal biographies, and I can't get to it. It's all tarped over from now until forever. So this was a little bit bittersweet because I don't know what's on that shelf. No, just a perfect title-by-title recall. I think there's a trade paperback of this book on that shelf. And I think that I go back to that trade paperback way too many times to have it. I shouldn't have a trade paperback. If I'm going back to the book often enough for me to notice it, then I'm going back to a trade paperback often enough to damage it. Better by far to have a hardcover that's already seen a lot of use. And that's what I found. This is Seymour Phillips' biography of Edward II. Big, fat thing from Yale. Yale sent me the advanced copy of this. They sent me the finished copy, and I wrote it up. They sent me the trade paperback, which is tarped over. But I found this thing for $1. So I grabbed it. That it'll be just fine by me. There was a great review, I think it was in the London Review of Books, or maybe the TLS, of this book that started out with the reviewer saying that the only thing they ever learned about Edward II in school was that he was gay and the way he died. that for those of you who maybe don't know, maybe want to look it up, brace yourself first, but the way he died is rumored that to involve a hot poker. Inserted somewhere. And the reviewer, wherever that was, the TLS or wherever, mentions that this author basically says that there's no proof for either one of those things. And which I thought was kind of funny because that means that I can tell you that reviewer went straight to those questions and maybe read only that in this book. But there's a lot else. Don't be fooled by Marlowe's play. Edward II led a fantastically interesting life. There's a lot of material, obviously, since this thing is huge. So I got it as a hardcover because I don't know when I'm going to have access to the trade paperback again, and because I go to it enough. I don't always go to Yale biographies like this often enough, and I think I have this one as an ebook as well. But anyway, that was my trip to the Brattle, and boy, oh boy, did I need it. Now, I don't know when I'll be going back. I think that Boston is bracing for a long stretch of genuine heat. Again, nothing approaching the triple-digit heat that's engulfing a lot of the American West and South, but still hotter than it's been here in a year. I think we're coming into that. The kind of heat that doesn't dissipate overnight. The kind of heat that it stays at 75 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit even overnight. If that's true, if I'm right about that, if that heat settles in with no air currents, no precipitation, no rain, no nothing for a long period of time, then mornings will start to become iniquitous too, and won't be a lot of fun to go to the Brattle and leave my heat-sensitive little bean. So I don't know when I'll be back to the Brattle again. I'm hoping next week sometime. Maybe this weekend if I can steel myself for Saturday Brattle people. But in the meantime, this was a blast. So a lot of biographies are fun. What's his name again? Seymour Phillips' biography of Edward II. Really the final word on this figure. Then the selected letters of William Styron. Fantastic to find this. Just fantastic. The Borgias, a translation from the Italian by a very nice guy, by a very good classicist. Sarah Bradford, biographer I know I like, writing about Cesare Borgia. So am I going to write about Cesare Borgia? Am I going to do I, Caesar? Then The Infernal World of Branwell Bronte by Daphne du Maurier. One of my favorite Daphne du Maurier books. Never thought it was a hardcover. Kipling, Auden and Company in a hardcover. The great Randall Jarrell, the great critic Randall Jarrell. Stonewall in the Valley in a beautiful hardcover with this dust jacket thing or whatever you want to call it. Great to have. Florence in the Age of Dante to replace the copy that went out. A couple of the adventures of Max Quest for Garb August. And finally, Television Crime Busters, which will have, it has the 87th Precinct by Ed McBain. It has a whole bunch of Scottish detectives, a whole bunch of British detectives from the BBC. Also, if I remember correctly, I glanced at it, I think somebody writes up a screenplay to a television episode of Cagney and Lacey. Can't imagine what that'll be like. They're not all that great in terms of detective work. But who knows how fascinating it will be. I noticed a lot of the stories in here are not long at all. So it'll be a lot of fun to pick through that. If not for Garb August, then for March Mystery Madness. when maybe my books will not be topped over anymore. Anyway, that was my trip to the Brattle. It was a ton of fun. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.